Hey, and welcome. Today we're going to go through day one of my trilingual creation of my Haggadah for Passover. We'll go over my process and my screen recordings, and I can share my thoughts with you as I'm going through it. Let's dive right in. Okay, by the way, to record my screen, I've been using this program called TimeSnapper, which basically just takes snapshots of your computer throughout the day, all the time. It just goes automatically, and you even forget that it's there. And I got it for myself originally just to kind of keep track of my time. But I really love this piece of software. Then you can play back your day like a movie. So this is the timeline. You see, this is when I started. I started a little bit late today. And these are the snapshots, and you can play them as a movie, or you can go frame by frame. It snaps every, I don't know what, every like 30 seconds or something like that. I don't remember what my settings are. On my first attempt at the quest for the Haggadah, I found this website called Haggadah.com that allow you to customize your own Haggadot. And I thought, oh, maybe this will be, I can just use that. So I'm just going to play through it. I tried to create and go through some kids' Haggadot, some presets that they had over here. Looked at them, and I found out really quickly that the software is not so good. The customization options are not great, and their pre-existing options were not amazing. One thing that I did take from them and that I will use is the idea of a coloring book, so to make it like much more hands-on and interactive, because I know that kids, if they have something to doodle with, they're a lot better off. So I might go back and use that. I thank them very much. I opened an account with them, but it's not quite there. It's not what I needed. As always, I was looking at some YouTube videos to get inspiration. It's just a form of procrastination, really. Then I'm like, all right, I'm going to just start using an AI. And I started with Claude because in my experience, Claude is a much better writer than GPT is, at least to my taste, in terms of prose. Now, it turns out I really jumped the gun because I'm not really ready to start writing. But as I gave Claude a prompt and I was explaining my project, what I'm trying to do over here, the 3 languages and all that. All right, so let's just go through my transcript this morning from Claude this morning. I said, hey, I'm going to create a kids-friendly, God-optional trilingual. I said trilingual, but you don't really have to worry about spelling with AI because it knows what you want to say. Quick and easy Haggadah and a guide for this coming Passover, aiming at kids around the age of 6. My daughter's is going to be 4.5, 5. My nephews and nieces go anywhere between 6 and 15, but okay. It should be fun for adults as well. The main languages are Hebrew and English, but I also need a brief Chinese explanation in it. I want to go with you page by page and decide on the content. Any questions before we begin? And I always ask any AI if they have any questions for me. Gave me a bunch of questions. I never like that. I'm like, just one at a time, please. Just one question at a time. How many pages are you thinking? This is not helpful. I said concise, obviously, but it's like, okay, these questions are not really helping me. So it asked me if to use the 14 steps. All this stuff in the beginning did not end up being useful. Like I did end up going back to the 14 steps. We started, and it's like, all right, so this is the first few pages. Like, let's simplify everything. We'll do a cover. It came up with our Passover adventure, a kid-friendly Haggadah. Okay, cute. That's okay. In Hebrew and in Chinese. Then it's like introduction. Welcome to our Passover, where we remember how the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt long ago. Really don't love that. Okay? And then introducing the Seder plates. So I went back to it. I said, how about a device? So I'm starting to think immediately, and that's one of the big lessons I'm taking out from here is, I wasn't quite ready for AI yet. Like the ideation stage, unless you're stuck with something, it's not so useful to have the AI. So I was thinking about this idea, which how about a mic, sort of like a hot mic idea, where because you always give people in the Seder roles to read, and I said, okay, how about a hot mic kind of thing? What do you think? Of course, if you want positive feedback, You always get like good compliments from AI, but that's just easy for your ego. So it starts suggesting a toy Moses staff, a small plush frog, which can be cute, but I like the idea of everything being contained within the Haggadah. So I'm like, what if it's something cut out? And instead of Torah scroll or Moses staff, I didn't like any of these. And then came up with the idea of let's do a frog that can be a cutout. Now, mind you, at the beginning, again, I was totally jumping the gun. I jumped into Adobe Express. I thought I'm gonna start designing this from scratch, right? So I created a new file in Adobe Express, copy pasted, even did some mini formatting. That slowed me down. I switched to Google Slides, and this is the frog, actually, the cutout frog. I mean, it's a placeholder in the meantime that I came up with. And even this, every text box is on its own thing. It's just, I just found it to be too slow. I'm like, oh, I just need a good old document, basically, to work in, because I'm not ready for even the most basic formatting. So that's a lesson. Look, I've never made any kind of book. So I jumped in straight into a Google Doc instead. And I really like their new tab features. So I'm like, all right, I'll just organize it with headings, heading 1, heading 2, and all that. And really, as I was working on it, I'm starting to see I'm not ready to. Here, let's go back to Claude for a second, and we'll see about the writing and the thought process and how I made some really crucial mistakes early on that, if this is helping anyone as a tutorial, you should learn from that. So anyway, I'm going back and forth with it about the cutout frog. I'm like, that's great. Whatever, he gives me great as a frog character as a narrator is perfect for a kid-friendly Haggadah. Sometimes it's great for the ego. And then he says, okay, hi, I'm Ribbit the Frog. I'll hop through the Passover story in English, Hebrew, and Chinese. Cut me out, and whoever holds me gets to read. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. First of all, Ribbit doesn't work in other languages. Then I'm going back and forth, like working on this part. Hi, I'm the frog, so I'm giving it whoever holds me gets to speak. I'm going back and forth here, and it's just like really jumping the gun. I agree that keeping him simply as the frog works best across all languages, fine. Because it said, okay, the next thing is probably the Seder plate was in his initial suggestions. And I'm like, wait a second, I want to talk about the fact that this is a spring ritual, that it's something that happens throughout all of cultures. And especially because, my kids who are in school over here keep talking about Easter bunnies and eggs and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is a universal thing, all right? This is our way of doing it. It goes back to my ideas of like this. It's important that this is our way, but this is not unique. Most cultures come out of the cold winter wanting to do something. So I wanted to add this part before we even jump into the Seder. I'm going back to it, not the specifics. Let me write the initial draft. And I wrote a little draft here. And it says, I like your draft. Thank you very much, Claude. Back and forth, we landed on a draft. And I plugged it in. Every culture celebrates spring. Every culture has its own tradition. After a long winter, we feel a new life. In our Jewish tradition, we celebrate Passover with this Seder, gathering family from everywhere. And that's really important because for my kids, I want them to understand that this is like it was for my mom. The important thing is to gather everyone. It's the one time a year, the opportunity for everyone to get together and retell the story of leaving Egypt. It's a story passed down through generations. Our parents told this to us, their parents told it to them, and maybe someday you'll tell it to your own children. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be a Jewish parent saying, hey, your own children. Now, a little pro tip for you all, if you've used Claude before, it goes through the characters and chats really, really quickly. And so you start to getting this error message here, or this tip, long chats cause you to reach your usage limits faster, start a new chat. And I downloaded this new plugin that I learned about, which is awesome, which is create a new chat from here. You just click the button, and it gives you a summary of your entire chat that you can copy. I usually just copy it, and then I go and I start a new chat, and I just paste it, and that's the starting point. So you'll see I actually have 3 different chats going from here because I'm always nervous about running out. I always run out of characters in the middle of my Claude projects. So let's run back to TimeSnapper and see how all this time has passed. And I'm just looking at my clock and I'm running out of time. My Friday today is my day that I work on my things that don't generate money. So here, everything that I described before, you're going to see here. You see, I'm starting to design. I'm going back and forth. This is actually a really good illustration of what was going on, looking for the frog and Envato elements. I have a subscription to Envato elements, which is just great for grabbing quick assets. I love to draw, but not now. And this is already, you see, I already gave up on Express. I went to Google Slides. I keep going on back and forth with Claude. And here I finally moved to a Google Doc. And this is when I decided, I just realized I'm going to go through this and I have to tell my family that I have to conduct the Seder. And I committed to it fully and I send that message to all my family. Here you see this is the new chat that I started because I ran out of things. And that's pretty much where we left. And in the meantime, Sunny says go for it, and my sister-in-law Michal said go for it as well. So that's great. So I'm excited now. I'm going to lead the Seder, but I also have this commitment locked in. And my dad, of course, being sarcastic, saying keep it under 20 minutes. So after the spring tradition, basically it says let's go to the Seder plate. And I needed some explanation on some of the things in the Seder plate, so I went back and forth and had it explain it to me. And I'm starting to fill this out. I'm going to explain the Seder plate. It's at the center of everything. As I'm going through this, let's pull up Claude again. As I'm going through this, I realized also we need an intro. And I'm like, all right, let's do it more kind of like storytelling. Who knows what it is for? The kids will say Seder plate. What is it for? They'll probably say some silly stuff. And then we can say, well, it helps us tell the Passover story. So let's take a closer look. So we introduce the Seder plate. And then we start going over the different parts of the Seder plate. I'm like, Harosis. I was working on wording and writing and all these things, filling out all the different parts of the Seder plate that are going to, you want to introduce them to say, hey, why do we even have this big plate in the middle of our table? And here I'm learning a few things. So for example, and I hope that the AI is not deceiving me, because that might be true as well. But I said, all right, for karpas, I said it's a green vegetable dipped in water. It represents the spring and the tears of the slaves. I said, why spring? Like, I never thought about that. It's like, oh, the vegetable, the green is the spring. So it's kind of like sweet and sour. And that was an interesting thing that I learned. It's like, okay, the spring is sweet, it's new life, but we still dip them in the tears of the slaves. So we went into that. And then Zroa. So I try to leave God out of Zroa. When I was a kid, I got as a present this illustrated Haggadah. I still think I have it at home. It had some weird illustrations in it. And one of them was this giant hand, like a literal hand, like Zeus, the hand of God, piercing through the clouds and smashing a city. And the city looked like a mixture between Egypt, but then the people running away for their lives from that like venging arm of God were wearing SS uniforms, and it was like an anti-Nazi thing. So it was really weird, but that's why the Zroa, even though it wasn't even directly related to the Zroa, but that idea of the Zroa of God, the arm of God, the power leading you away was such a strong image in my mind. Now, there's a dilemma here because I love the storytelling and the imagery, but of course it's really problematic also. So this is what I'm telling the AI here. How do I describe the Zroa to the kids? And obviously it's an evocative thing. You have a big piece of bone on your plate, and here you see. So these debates that I have to myself. Maybe we should mention it was meant to represent the arm of God because it's literally called an arm, and that's another way to teach Hebrew. By the way, Zroa is arm, like it's, and this imagery is powerful. But then again, it talks about the vengeance, and it talks about like it's really non-Jewish. I mean, you're literally giving, if you're trying to think about God in the Jewish terms, you're giving God a form. Like this is idolatry. This is this is the arm of God. So it's a weird thing. I don't know where I landed here in the meantime. And then there's always the beitzah, the egg, which is not, there is no blessing on it, but it's always a fun part, dipping the hard-boiled eggs in the salt water. And I want to tie it back to the Easter eggs and remove religion out of it completely. And then we have the chazeret, which I'm like, okay, what is bitter herbs number 2? I didn't fully understand, but I guess that is the chrein part that's for the Hillel sandwich. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, this is it for the Seder plate, right? And it says yes. And here again, I used that plugin, create new chat from here, because I was getting this warning and I wanted to keep going. This is a great, easy little plugin over here. So I continue from here. This is the pasted summary from before. And then I'm like, okay, I was kind of lost. I'm like, where do I go from here? And he just spews at me the 4 questions, the story of Exodus, the 10 plagues, the Afikomen hunt, songs. And I'm like, I don't know. I felt like I was already losing the forest for the trees over here. I'm putting in all these Seder plates things. Oh, I wanted a quick illustration of a Seder plate. And I'm going back to this family-friendly 15-minute Seder from PJ Library. I have it here, this PDF. And I see that the first thing that they have over here is Kadesh, right? And Kadesh is the blessing on the wine, and it's the whole thing of the four cups of wine. And I'm like, oh, this is really important. How come we haven't even gotten to that yet? And it's not only important, it's really fun for the kids because it stands for the fact that this is a day of indulgence. The kids love the fact that it's grape juice. Our kids, we don't give them juice like day to day. So the grape juice on its own is kind of like the wine for the grown-ups. Get them high on sugars. I'm like, there is something just basically missing. I'm like, how did PJ Library with this beautifully illustrated version do it in 15 minutes? And I'm like, oh, they're not skipping over the basics, the 14, 15 steps. Okay? And so I'm looking at this and I'm asking Claude what should be next, and I don't agree with it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and see, why is it so bad? Why is it so difficult to do the original 14, 15 things? This is the structure of the whole thing. This should have been my structure from the get-go, right? That was my eureka moment. This should have been my structure from the get-go. And there's the song. And to me, it always goes back to the music, the tradition, the way to remember, the way to memorize. Kadesh uchas karpas yachatz. So you got your structure right there in a memorable way. And I'm already thinking I'm going to translate this to English somehow so they can all remember that. And they can remember the 15 steps. So now I have my structure very clear to me. I'm like, all right, all this work I did on the Seder plate, where do I put this? And I'm asking the thing, I'm like, should it come right before the karpas? But I didn't even need to ask. This is just insecurity. Like, it was obvious that when we start actually doing stuff with the Seder plate, which is the karpas, when we dip, the veggies in the salt water, that's when we talk about it. I kind of wish that maror and matzah and korech, all these things that also involve the Seder plate, were together, so it was like a Seder plate section. But I'm not going to change the tradition around because the tradition is important. So I can talk about the Seder plate here. And I'm going to talk about the things. I'll go back to my document. Now I'm cooking. Now I know that I'm just structuring right now. And so we do, the spring tradition. We're talking about how we're going to take turns to speak. And then the preview, table of content, I just love calling this song. I mean, I'll change the name probably, but this is what we're going to be doing tonight, guys. And Kadesh, we're going to do the blessing on the wine. So now I'm just jotting notes for myself. We do an awful lot of blessing on grapes in Judaism. Tonight we do it 4 times, so let's go. The kids are learning a lot of prayers, and so I want to maybe talk a little bit, find a way to talk about Baruch Atah Adonai, the things that always repeat themselves, that my kids are already, at 4 and 3, are already just parroting, but explaining that in a way that works. They know Kiddush. We do Kiddush every week. So we're going to get to do it 4 times. So Kadesh is a banger of an opener. Uchatz, we would always skip that. It's like how many times you already washed your hands, you showered beforehand. But I think it's kind of fun. You talk hygienics. And I had to ask GPT because I didn't understand the difference between uchatz and then there's uchatz and rachza, which are kind of the same thing. It's washing your hands. But I guess uchatz is the first time because you're about to touch food with a Seder plate. And so you need to wash your hands, but you don't say the prayer, and then you say the prayer before you're actually about to eat. Now, I'm like, we never did that, and these are the only redundant steps. When I'm looking at all those 15 steps, these are the only ones that seem a little bit redundant to me, but I actually think they can be really fun and an opportunity to talk about hygienics. So I don't know if I'm going to be doing away with them, even though so many sidurs do away with them. So here I'm putting on my little spiel about the Seder plate, and I'm going to move these later, the maror and the charoset, when we do korech, right? But I'm going to talk about the things that don't have their own specific sections, like the Zroa, and I'll probably have cut out elements to it, which is why I put this little screen grab to remember that. And from there, we're going to go into karpas. We can say the prayer. We can explain it, and now it is very hands-on and tactful, and and we taste the kalpa. So that's great. And we can do beitza after that. We can do the beitza right afterwards. We already have the salt water dipped, and we can do that little part about it. Also fun. Now we go to yachatz, of course, the afikomen. That's really fun, but it's often just been ignored because there's no prayer or anything around it. So I want to create a little bit more of a big spiel about the fact that we're breaking the matzah. And I came up with the idea, I don't know if I'll stick with it, that perhaps instead of the Seder leader doing it, is we give the oldest child kind of like to see which half is the biggest half, kind of like a wishbone kind of thing. And to also, that's a way to engage maybe the older children. In our case, we're going to have a 15-year-old. So it's an idea over here. And then we get into the Magid, which is the biggest part of the whole Seder. And at this point, I see that I'm opening, this is the coloring book that I'm opening, and that's actually, it has a pretty good structure, and I'm looking side by side at it, and I see what is being included, and I kind of like this format, so I'm looking at it at the same time. At this point also, notice I switched from Claude to ChatGPT, because I realize at this point we're not doing any prose writing. Claude is very stingy on the character amounts and all that. GPT doesn't have this problem, and I found GPT to be actually a better strategic thinker and structuring thinker. So I'm like, all right, just tell me all the stages, and it broke into sub-stages, which I really like. So we get to the Magid part, and I'm looking at the regular structure of it. And I feel like we need to reshuffle it a little bit. So I'm going to bring my GPT chat actually. And if we look at the Magid, which is really the meat of it, the central part of the Haggadah, it says the 4 questions, the story of the Exodus, the 4 sons and their perspectives, the 10 plagues, and then drink another cup of wine. Well, I felt like, my daughter really loves the story of baby Moses and the coal and all that. So I said, okay, we can actually start with the hero's journey, and we'll start with the 4 questions because it's musical and it's fun. And then we're going to go to baby Moses, and I can talk about the 3 siblings, which I had to research myself, Aaron and Miriam and Moses. Tell the story of the coal, of the angel. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Anyway, we'll get into it. The burning bush, call to action, and then of course the Exodus, and then the 10 plagues where you dip your finger in the wine, and that's very interactive and really fun. And then the 4 sons, which I haven't really wrapped my heads around in their perspectives because I remember it being a little bit problematic as well, but we'll have to figure it out. Same with Dayenu. Like, I need to find it, like, the tune is great. It's actually very, very, we used to sing it all the time just for fun because my son, Forrest, he's a little brother, and in Cantonese, Dai Dai just means little brother. It's Didi in Mandarin and Dai Dai in Cantonese. So we always sang Dai Daienu to him because he's Dai Dai. We still call him Dai Dai. We drink the second cup, of course. Rachza, so we talked about this, and I actually thought about, hey, maybe I can have Grandpa, who's really obsessed about dirty fingernails, to do an inspection and actually get him to be a little bit more involved as well. And so we already talked about the blessings and the prayers. So we're going to talk, hey, like we can bless everything. We can bless over wine and bread like we're used to, but we can also bless over washing our hands. And so I like that idea. We'll see. It might end up in the optional parts. And then motzi matzah. So we're going to do hamotzi. They're all familiar with it already, which is fun. Which is fine. That's going to go really easily, I think. Maror and korech. So the Hillel sandwich. That's very easy to do storytelling around that, and that's going to be really, really cool. And then Shulchan Orech, great. Sending them to look for the Afikomen. Now, we'll see. Of course, the challenge of every Seder is to keep it going post the dinner. So a few strategies here. First of all, I'm going to postpone the dessert until Nirtzah, so there's something to look forward to. For the Afikomen hunt, I'm going to try, how can we make the Afikomen more of a real dessert? That was a question. Like, how can it be, or maybe you get the prize on the spot, but how do you make it like more engaging so people come back to the table afterwards? And then there's the story of Elijah, and the Barech, which I as a kid was enthralled with, this spirit ghost of this prophet and opening the door for it. It's very Santa-like. So I'd like to try to put it here with the third cups. And then for Hallel, I'm like, let's try to make this our own. What are we praising for? And we don't have to really use God, but are we praising our identity? Are we praising our mom, that because of her we're getting together, right? Are we celebrating the fact that we get here together and celebrate this family tradition together, the spring cleaning? So put our own spin on this. And then, of course, the greatest hits of Nirtzah, which is Haggadah, etc. So that's pretty much as... Okay, so what do you think? Can I make it through? Can I finish a Haggadah on time, on top of everything else going on? We'll find out. I will check you on the next time, which hopefully will be very soon. Bye-bye.